Jimmy Page would eventually become rock's legendary guitarist in Led Zeppelin, but years earlier, he was one of London's busiest session musicians, quietly appearing on other people's records, often unnamed and unnoticed. 7. I Pity the Fool.
Well, I pity the fool.
In 1965, a young Davy Jones entered a London studio with a band called the Manish Boys. He was still years away from becoming David Bowie and decades away from being regarded as one of the 20th century's most influential artists. Nobody inside that studio could have known what was coming. Jimmy Page was only 21 himself, already among the city's busiest session guitarists, and he had arrived to complete a job, not to witness history being made. The track was titled, I Pity the Fool. It was a fairly standard mid-60s R&B song, written for a young vocalist who was still developing his sound. Page supplied the guitar solo, a swirling and slightly rough-edged passage that slices through the song with more intensity than the arrangement around it. By his later standards, it was hardly a showcase of virtuosity. Instead, it was a young guitarist delivering exactly what the session required, and delivering it effectively. But their connection continued beyond that recording. Bowie would eventually claim that Page gave him the riff that became the Superman, which appeared 5 years later on an entirely different album. Even if the details of that story are not remembered perfectly by everyone involved, it reflects something genuine, a professional relationship between two future giants that began during an obscure pop session, years before either man became famous. I Pity the Fool never turned into a successful single. It barely leaves a mark on Bowie's catalog. It is almost a footnote beneath another footnote. Yet buried inside that swirling guitar solo is Jimmy Page doing what he had done for years before Led Zeppelin came along, arriving, plugging in, and playing better than the song demanded. Nobody applauded. Nobody remembered his name from the credits. He simply packed away his guitar and headed toward the next session. 6. In My Time of Sorrow.
In my time of sorrow.
Much of Jimmy Page's session work left behind little evidence beyond a name hidden inside a musician's union record. In My Time of Sorrow stands apart as one of the exceptions. Page co-wrote the song with his girlfriend at the time, American singer-songwriter Jackie DeShannon. The track was written specifically for Marianne Faithfull's self-titled debut album from 1965. It remains one of the few recordings from Page's pre-Zeppelin years where he appears not simply as a hired guitarist, but as an official songwriter. Musically, the track is modest, a soft, folk-pop piece surrounded by harpsichord and Faithfull's delicate, unpolished voice. Nothing about the recording announces a future rock legend, but the songwriting credit reveals something the music itself does not. Page, music, was already doing more than playing other people's parts in 1965. He was helping create melodies, structures, music, and ideas that other performers could turn into songs. Faithfull was only about 19 then, while Page was 21. They were two young musicians making a small, beautiful record that neither would ultimately be remembered for. Once the session ended, Page did something unusual for the artists he supported. Rather than disappearing back into London studios, he joined Faithfull on a short European tour, performing behind her live instead of returning immediately to session work. The partnership was brief and largely forgotten, leaving little trace in the mythology that would later grow around Page. Led Zeppelin was still nowhere in sight, and there was no guarantee of the fame waiting ahead. In My Time of Sorrow is not a masterpiece. It is a modest and heartfelt recording made by two people who would eventually shape completely different parts of British music. Page's name remains quietly listed among the writers, a detail that only the most dedicated collectors are likely to notice. 5. Baby, Please Don't Go.
Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go.
Sometimes the wrong side of a record becomes the one people remember. Them released Baby Please Don't Go in 1964,
covering the classic Big Joe Williams blues song from 1935, and it seemed destined to be the main attraction. Instead, the B-side featured an original composition from the band's 20-year-old frontman, a song called Gloria, and Gloria went on to become one of the era's defining garage rock tracks. Baby Please Don't Go was ultimately overshadowed by its own flip side. Jimmy Page was there for both recordings. He was not responsible for the song's famous riff. That came from them guitarist Billy Harrison, whose snarling five-note hook would influence generations of blues rock guitarists. Page handled rhythm guitar, keeping the foundation steady while Harrison supplied the lead, a supporting role with little recognition attached to it and even less expectation of fame. This was among Page's earliest professional sessions, arriving while he was still fighting for a place in London's fiercely competitive recording world. He was not yet the guitarist every label wanted first. He was simply another young musician competing for the same opportunities, accepting whatever work appeared and learning the discipline of serving the song instead of simply playing what he wanted. Baby Please Don't Go called for restraint, and that was exactly what he delivered. Today, the song's reputation comes largely from its B-side. Van Morrison's Gloria grew into a garage rock staple, later covered by everyone from The Doors to Patti Smith. Meanwhile, Baby Please Don't Go slipped quietly into the background of them's catalog. Page's rhythm guitar exists somewhere within that forgotten space, unnoticed and uncredited, the earliest step toward a journey that would eventually reach packed arenas. 4. Season of the Witch.
What do you think I see? Summer cat looking.
London in 1966 was overflowing with busy recording studios, and Donovan's sessions were among the most active. The Scottish singer-songwriter had already moved beyond his early folk persona and was pursuing something more unusual, built around modal melodies, jazz-inspired rhythm sections, and lyrics drenched in psychedelic imagery. He needed musicians capable of entering that world, and two of those players were Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones, still years away from becoming bandmates. Donovan's 1966 album Sunshine Superman features Season of the Witch, where Page's presence is particularly clear. The song moves on a slow, sinister groove, while Page's guitar tears through it with an intensity that almost clashes with Donovan's soft vocal style. His playing burns through an otherwise hazy arrangement, injecting tension into a track built around cool restraint. Throughout this period, Page and Jones returned to Donovan's sessions again and again, developing an unspoken musical language that would later matter when they joined the same group. At that point, neither musician was looking that far ahead. They were simply working players, helping shape someone else's music, arriving when needed and adapting to whatever sound the producer demanded that day. Sunshine Superman emerged as one of the era's defining psychedelic pop records, while Season of the Witch has endured for decades, covered by musicians drawn to its distinctive combination of danger and groove. Page's guitar gives the track its lasting bite. Two future bandmates were backing a solo performer, unknowingly preparing the ground for something neither could yet imagine. 3. I Can't Explain.
Again and again, I know what it means, but can't explain.
Could The Who's breakthrough hit have sounded the same without an uncredited session guitarist? Released in 1965, I Can't Explain established the band as a major force, a sharp and urgent piece of mod rock driven by Pete Townshend's cutting riff. But Townshend wasn't the only guitarist involved in the recording. Producer Shel Talmy brought in session musicians to strengthen the band's studio sound, something common during that period, and Jimmy Page was among them. The Who have acknowledged his involvement over the years. Page supplied rhythm guitar, supporting Townshend's riff instead of taking its place, giving the track added weight and stability beneath the lead. It was hardly a glamorous role. There was no solo, no dramatic spotlight, and nothing designed to attract attention. His contribution becomes noticeable only when you know where to listen, hidden within a song centered completely on another guitarist's sound. The Who would eventually become one of rock's defining acts, and I Can't Explain represented the real start of that rise, becoming their first UK top 10 single.
Townsend created the riff, while Page strengthened it, an unseen framework supporting one of rock's most instantly recognizable openings. There is an unusual irony here. One of rock's legendary riff creators once relied on a session guitarist who would later become equally celebrated for writing iconic riffs of his own. Page completed the assignment and vanished from the record's credits. He became another London session musician who helped create landmark recordings for other artists without leaving an obvious trace at the time. 2. Beck's Bolero. Mention Beck's Bolero to anyone familiar with Led Zeppelin's origins, and you are pointing toward the recording many historians regard as a blueprint. Jeff Beck had recently departed the Yardbirds in 1966 and wanted a powerful statement to introduce his solo career. He needed something ambitious enough to demonstrate what he could do beyond the limits of the band. The track was built around the driving pattern of Ravel's orchestral bolero, with a lineup that now looks almost unbelievable. Jimmy Page handled the 12-string guitar, John Paul Jones took the bass, Keith Moon occupied the drum stool, Nicky Hopkins supplied the piano. 4 future giants of 2 defining bands were gathered in one studio, creating an instrumental that builds from controlled tension into explosive intensity in just over 2.5 minutes. Some historians have argued that Page was actually the session's central architect, helping shape the arrangement with Beck rather than merely playing his assigned part. Released in 1967 as the B-side of Hi-Ho Silver Lining, the track was overshadowed by Beck's pop-oriented A-side. It suffered the same fate that had hidden so much of Page's earlier session work. But Beck's Bolero refused to remain forgotten. For decades, musicians and critics have identified it as the point where the sound that would eventually become Led Zeppelin first emerged, months before the group officially existed. 2 of the 4 musicians would later become members of that band. A third, Keith Moon, supposedly joked that the whole thing would go over like a lead balloon, a line some believe influenced the band's eventual name. Whether that story is completely accurate or not, the session itself is well documented. The future was already taking shape. 1. With a Little Help from My Friends.
What would you do if I sang out of tune?
By 1968, the songs Jimmy Page had quietly helped create were beginning to form something much bigger than any individual credit suggested. Joe Cocker was still a little-known singer from Sheffield working on his debut album, while producer Denny Cordell built the record's sound around Cocker's raw, gravelly voice. Page ultimately played on 5 tracks from that album. 1 would become its defining centerpiece. With a Little Help from My Friends was already well known before Cocker recorded it, originally a Beatles song performed by Ringo Starr on Sgt. Pepper's Little Hearts Club Band. Cocker completely transformed it into a slow-burning soul epic, while Page's guitar launches the track with a vibrato-soaked howl that follows Cocker's vocal almost perfectly.
This isn't the sound of a session musician simply filling a gap. It feels more like another lead singer. The track became Cocker's first #1 hit, established his career, and eventually led to his legendary Woodstock performance the following year. Years later, the song reached another generation as the theme for the Wonder Years, exposing Page's uncredited guitar playing to millions of viewers who never knew whose fingers were behind the show's opening music. More than anything else on this list, it demonstrates the pattern that shaped Page's entire career before Zeppelin. Brilliant performances were attached to somebody else's name, buried inside songs so successful that the guitarist responsible simply vanished. He had already spent years mastering that particular kind of anonymity. Within a year, he would disappear no longer. Long before Jimmy Page created his own band, he had spent years helping build other people's biggest records from behind the scenes. Cocker, Beck, The Who, Donovan, Them, Faithful, and even a teenage Bowie all bear traces of his playing. Subscribe for more hidden music history.